Okay, I think we'll get started, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening in our webinar about foster care. So let's begin with our welcome to country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Palawa and Pakana people of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, as well as emerging leaders. So what we're going to cover today, we'll have a really great overview of foster care. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Kylie Gibbs. I'm the Care Engagement Officer here in Tasmania. So I'm based on the northwest coast and I work the whole of Tasmania basically. We also have one of our wonderful carers joining us today, Katie, who is down in the south. And she'll be here to also answer a few questions you may have later on. And as mentioned, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and she'll read them out to me as we go along. Hopefully we'll be able to answer anything you have, any questions you have about foster care. So firstly, things that we're going to cover. So Life Without Barriers as an organisation, who we are. We'll talk about foster care. We'll talk about children in care and why children come into care. And what you're all here for, I'm sure, is wanting to know those steps on how to become a carer and what's involved. And we'll also go through some commonly asked questions, which might cover off everything you need to know. But if not, as I said, pop something in the chat and we'll answer that as well for you. So let's begin with Life Without Barriers. So Life Without Barriers is a national organisation. We have been around for a little over 3 decades, and it was started up by a group of community members who, I think I recall the story once. It was a guy, a corporate gentleman, I think, who had a child with a disability, and he was looking at services out there and couldn't find something that was meeting the needs of his child. So a group of members got together and started Life Without Barriers, and their clear vision was to partner with people to improve lives for the better. So we now support 23,000 people in over 400 communities, and we have a range of different services and programs that we run. So we have foster care and family supports. We work in the disability sector, the aged care sector, mental health, alcohol and other drug addictions. Also have refugee and asylum seeker programs, amongst many other things. In Tasmania, we predominantly have programs in mental health, the disability sector, and of course foster care. So we're here today to talk about foster care. But if you're wanting to know anything else about any of our other services, please make contact and we can talk to you about other programs we run as well. So let's talk about foster care. So foster care is for children who need time away from their family. I've just done something to my screen. What did I just do? No, there we go. I'm back again. Just done it again. Time away from their family, and foster care provides a safe and supportive home where they can heal and grow. Might be for one night, a week or a year, just depending on when that child comes into care. So I guess the process with a child coming into care in Tasmania, so Child Safety Services identify young children or young people who are at risk. And they look at whether that child is best to stay in the home and put support services in place for that child and the family for the child to be able to stay there. However, if the child is at risk and is not safe, then they would look at removing the child and placing the child in foster care. And I'll talk through the next slide. We'll talk through the different types of care that we look for then. But the goal, I guess, for children is always to return home where possible. And putting those supports in place is really important. Some of you may have heard other terms for foster care. That could be out-of-home care or family-based care. All of these mean the same thing, basically. It's caring for a child who can't live at home. Nationally, there's around 50,000 children who are unable to live at home, and that number seems to be growing all the time. So as mentioned, there's different types of care. So when that child first comes into care, the first thing Child Safety Services would do would be look for a what we call a kinship foster care placement. So that can be a relative or someone known to the child to care for that child. So that's a really great outcome for a young person or a child, because they already have that relationship with that person. As long as it's a safe environment, then kinship foster care is a really great option. If there's no one else, if there's no one out there to provide that placement, that kinship placement, then we would look for a short-term placement for the child or a long-term foster care placement, depending how long they were coming into care for. Initially, they would go on a very short-term order, and the parents would need to do certain things for the child to be able to return home. And sometimes that can then lead to longer-term placements or shorter-term placements, just depending on what the outcomes look like for that child. When we place a child in long-term care or with what we call a permanent carer, we also look for a respite carer. So a respite carer cares for that child 1 weekend once a month. And as long as, you know, it's the same child for that respite carer. So once a month, you would have the same child come and stay with you for 1 weekend once a month. It is a really excellent opportunity for the child, because they get the best of both worlds. They get 2 lots of carers. Where possible, we try and match the child with something a little bit different from their full-time placement. So if they're placed in a household with lots of other children, we might try and look for a respite carer who is on their own, that they can devote the whole weekend to that child and get them, spoil them rotten, I guess. So it's really lovely to be able to have the it's great when you do have that pool of carers, that we can choose the right match for that child and give them a different experience. It's also really great for the long-term carers or the short-term carers that are caring for that child, because it gives them an opportunity to spend some time with their own children or with their partner or whoever, is in their life. It's really important for them to have that time for themselves as well, for some self-care. So let's look at Tasmania. So when we look at children in care in Tasmania, this was based on 2019, but there were 1,104 children residing in foster care. And of those, half of them were in foster care, and then 39% in kinship care, and then the remaining 6% were in what we call residential care. So residential care is when a home is set up for a child where we can't find a foster care placement for that particular child. They've got complex needs, so they may go into what we call residential care. So our goal is to get them out of residential care and back into foster care where possible, but that's a home set up with people working shift work, basically looking after that child or young person. So let's look at why children come into care. So children come into care for lots of different reasons. Look, it could be that the parents have mental health concerns, or there may be a death in the family. Sometimes we've got some children placed at the moment where the carers have a disability and they just don't have the skills to be able to care for their child. So the child comes into foster care, and in that situation, the parents would still have a lot of contact with their children. It just means that they can't live. It's not a safe environment for them to live with their parents. However, most of the time, a great portion of the time, it's because of some sort of abuse. So the child's had emotional abuse or physical abuse or sexual abuse or neglect, or it might be that the child comes into care because of neglect, and later we find out there's been some type of abuse as well. So sometimes we don't have the full story when a child's first placed in care. So it's something that sometimes as the placement continues, and it might be the foster carer is the person that the child goes to talk about some of these reasons. So a lot of our training is around how you would respond in that situation and what you would do. So we do have a lot of training around how to react in that situation if a child does talk to you about their past. So who can be a carer? There's no age limitations as such, however, over the age of 18. However, we do prefer people who have had a little bit of life experience. Over 25 years is really great because you've had some life experience there as well. You need to permanently reside in Australia and have permanent residency. You need to have the time and space and availability to be able to care for a child, particularly for a full-time carer. Respite carer, you need to be available on the weekends. So well and healthy is really important. You need to have a regular source of income as well, so you're not reliant on the reimbursement that you receive as a foster carer. That money's there to meet the needs of the child in your care. So you can be of any culture, religion, gender identity, single, in a relationship, rent, own your own home, that doesn't matter. Yeah, you just need to be able to, I guess, go through the assessment process and see if it's the right thing for you. So what we look for in our carers, some of the attributes and beliefs that we know are really good for children who do come into care is having that time to spend with children. You need to be able to have the ability to understand that the best place for that child is to return home with their families when it's safe to do so, because their parents are still their parents, and children will want to go home in lots of situations. So we talk through that as part of our training as well, and we do a lot of work in that area. You need to believe and help care and support the children. You need to have a spare room in your home. If you don't have a spare room, if you're looking at respite care and your children were happy to share for the weekend, that's also an option. But a child with a trauma background who has had abuse, it's really important for them to have their own space. Understanding of why children do things also can help a child manage tough feelings of missing their family. And it's important that children feel included in their family when they're in foster care as well. So, you know, I often recall some young people talking to a bunch of foster carers who were doing the training and really keen to become carers. And I remember one of these girls once saying to the group that it was really important for her to have her space when she needed it, but also for her to know that the carer was there when she was ready. Yeah, so always give them that space, but also just so that they know that you're always going to be there for them is really important. Some patience and understanding, acceptance and availability. Commitment, it is a big commitment. You need to be flexible, time to give, and a commitment to maintaining and strengthening family relationships. Really important. So the steps to becoming a carer. This is the one everyone's wanting to know about. So having a chat with me is probably one of the first steps. So I'll have a chat to you over the phone, or we can email initially and organise a time to have a brief chat, and then I'll forward your details onto one of our care assessors. So we have a care assessor in each region, so someone based in Launceston, someone in the northwest, and also down south, and they will make a time to come out and do a visit with you. During that home visit, you do complete an application form, which they'll help you with, and start the process of background check. So that's a police check, a child safety check, and getting your working with vulnerable children's card. From there, while we're waiting for that paperwork to come back, we'll pop you on our list for the next upcoming training. At the moment, the training is being done virtually. However, hopefully we'll be going back to face-to-face training in the near future. But the training is a free 2-day introductory training, and you basically walk out of the training going, yes, this is definitely for me. Where do I sign? How do I become a carer? Or it might open your eyes and go, actually, this isn't the right time for me at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. The whole idea of the training is to give you some real life examples of what it's like to be a carer. There'll be opportunities to talk to foster carers, opportunities to talk to children in care, and part of that process is for you to work out if it's something that is, the right timing and everything for you and your family. So your partner, husband would be invited along to the training as well, or wife. And it's a really great opportunity to ask lots of questions, find out a little bit about trauma and how it affects young people who are in care, and the way we react and respond to them is very different to the way you possibly have reacted and responded to your own children as you've been bringing them up. So it's a great training course, it really is. From the training, we'll touch base with you. Part of that training will also be assessing ourselves whether we think that you do have the attributes needed to become a carer. And then we go into the assessment stage. So the assessment stage is a number of lots of paperwork you need to do, which we'll take you through. There's home safety check, medical forms, references. Plus we do a series of interviews with the whole family. So the children in the home are included in that as well. We'll just have a bit of a chat and play some games and activities with young people just to get a feel for how they feel about someone joining their family. And we talk to any children, even if they've left home. We have a chat with the children about what it was like growing up in your home and bits and pieces. So the process of the assessment is quite lengthy, but as you can imagine, it needs to be, because we need to have the right people in these roles. So it does feel a little bit invasive, but I guess the whole reason for that is so that we can match you with the right child. It's really important to, find out as much as we can about your family to make sure we're placing the right child into your family. Because there's nothing worse than placing, not having the right match, I guess, and then the placement not working. It's just re-traumatising for that child and not great for the carers as well. Once we collect all of that information, we then send it through to Child Safety Services, and hopefully they approve our assessment. If not, they'll come back to us with a series of questions that we can come back to the carers and gather some further information. So that's the formal part of the presentation, I guess. I haven't been looking at the chat room, but I'm guessing, Katie, have we got anything we need to answer before we go on to some of our frequently asked questions? No, I take it no. So some of our questions, let's see. So am I single? We've covered this. Can I foster? Yes. Families come in all shapes and sizes, as do our foster families. We have a number of carers who are single, male and female, who offer respite, and some who offer long-term care as well. We are a same-sex couple. Can we foster? Of course. Life Without Barriers values a diverse community of foster carers. Can I foster even though I don't have my own children? Absolutely, yes. I guess in some ways, sometimes it can be beneficial not having, as parents, I know sometimes we get quite set in our ways of how to react and respond to difficult behaviours and that type of thing, whereas the way you respond to a child with a trauma background, as I mentioned before, can be quite different. So therefore, if you're not set in a particular way of parenting, sometimes it's easier to be able to respond in a particular way if you're not used to responding in a more old-fashioned way, I guess. So yes, that's not a problem at all, with or without children. I guess having some experience around children is really important, whether it's nieces or nephews, or if you've worked in the industry. Absolutely. About your home. So do I need to have a spare room? Yes, in most instances. As I mentioned before, if you are offering respite care, it's possible to have your kids share for that weekend when a young person comes. I always say it's really lovely for them to have their own doona cover and their own things in the room though, so that they're not feeling like they're jumping into someone else's room. Do I have to own my own home to be a foster carer? No. However, you need to demonstrate that your premises are safe and suitable to foster. You can be renting in public housing or paying off your home. That's not a problem. We do a home safety check. So part of that first visit would be looking at some of the things that might need to be addressed. An example of that is if you don't have a fenced backyard area, that's one thing we really look for. Other things are just depending on the age of the child as well, but it's important to have that fenced yard area away from the driveway as well if possible. But they're things we talk through from the very start with you. About your family, can I have my own children and foster other children? Absolutely. We would always look at placing, though, a child younger than your youngest. So if you've got children and your youngest is 6 years of age, we would look at placing a child under 6. It's just not a great, it's not ideal for your own children to place a child who's older than your children, which is really important. Will all my family be involved in the assessment process? Yes, absolutely. Everyone in the household will be part of the assessment process. Important to make sure everyone knows what fostering is and is on board with the decisions. So we give some scenarios to little children. Little children are often very excited to have a foster sister or brother join their home, but we do give them some scenarios of where, if that child was to break their toys or how would they feel? And we have some great little conversations with kids, because they always think of the positive, which is lovely, but they don't think about how tough it can be if the child, particularly if the foster child has different boundaries and that type of thing. We get the whole family thinking about how things might be a little bit different to what they have been. How are children matched to foster carers? So getting to know you, it's really important that we know as much as we can about your family so that we can make sure we match the right child. And can I choose the age and gender of the child? Absolutely. So part of the process is we ask what your preferences are for age and gender. However, the person doing the assessment will make a recommendation as well. And both pieces of information will go through with your assessment, but you get the final decision, I guess. So if, for example, if the assessment, the assessor thought you would be fantastic with children up to the age of 10 or 11, however, you would prefer a child up to the age of 8, it means that we can place a child older than 8 with you if it's something we would talk to you about that first. But at the end of the day, foster carers are volunteers, so you do get a say in the process, and we find out as much information as we can about that child and bring it to you in that decision-making process once you become a carer. Do children in care have ongoing relationships with their family? In most cases, yes. Often there will be access once a week or once a fortnight, or something will be set up. Initially, it would be supported, so there would be a support worker there supervising the access visits. But it's really important that they maintain that connection with their family. What happens if the placement isn't working? So stability is so important for these children. So this is where we ask our carers to communicate with us early on. It's really important that we know what's happening in the household. If you're not coping, we need to talk to you. We have a practitioner that works with every foster carer in the placement, so you would become quite close with that Life Without Barriers worker and talk to them so that we can try and keep the placement going if we can, if everyone's happy. But obviously, if it's not working for you and your family, then we need to end the placement, but we'll always make sure that it's done in a really positive way. So having the time, but communication is one of the most important things there. We don't expect carers to know everything and be able to do everything. We need to be there to help you through the whole process. About the support, so as I mentioned, we have a practitioner who works with the carers. You're never alone. We also have a whole team of clinician on board who we can call on as well if we need to. There's other foster carers you can call on. We have our ambassador, Katie, who's fantastic, that she talks to a lot of our carers as well. And we'll get her online in a minute, hopefully. So some of the support, we have training, we have the initial training, and then we have some ongoing training. We have a whole network of online training that you can access to find out lots of different things about foster care, disability, autism. There's a whole wealth, there's a whole, loads and loads and loads of training online. We have our respite care and networkings. You do get a reimbursement for caring for the child, however that is to meet the needs of the child. And there's always someone on call. So if you're offering respite care one weekend once a month, there'll always be someone on call all weekend that you can contact if you need to. So what paperwork will I need to complete? I mentioned some of this earlier on. So you've got all of the probity, the police check, child safety check, and you're working with Vulnerable Children's Card. You also need to have a health check done and a medical questionnaire. So the health check is basically a form that you complete yourself, just in regards to if you have any, you're on any medications, you drink, if you smoke, that's sort of on the health checklist. The medical questionnaire is one we ask you to get your doctor to complete. We just need to make sure you're, healthy and able to care for a child. 2 references, and we get you to do your life stories, and that's a dot point of significant things that have happened in your life. They're the things that we cover off on as part of the assessment. And then we have a whole lot of policies and bits and pieces that we go through with you. Do need to have car insurance and home contents insurance on your home as well. So we ask for copies of those. So Katie, are you there? Have we got any questions, Katie, that I haven't answered?
Hi, everybody. How are you going? I can't see you or hear you, but yeah, you can definitely chat to me in the chat box if you want to. Yeah, we did actually have a question, Kylie, and it was a question from Jake, and he said that do we have to worry about privacy in regards to young people's parents? And it's honestly a question that I get really, really often. People, get concerned. They know that children have been removed for a certain reason, and a lot of people sort of want to know, what that is, like why, haven't those parents been able to care, for that child? A lot of people say to me as well, like, do their parents love, their children? And I'm like, oh yeah, like they really, really do. Those, children, in a sense, belong in that family. And as you mentioned earlier, the goal really is to try and, bring everything together with, lots of help and a really big circle of people to be able, for these children to be able to go back to their families. And so I understand people worrying about the parents, but Jake, in my experience, I mean, I haven't even properly introduced myself, but, perhaps I should do that first. I'll let you know, like, we're based in the south. Greg and I have 6 biological children. People sort of freak out about that, but the oldest 4 have already moved on. They've moved out of home. We've got 2 little ones at home, and at the moment we've got 1 little person in care. She's 4 years old. But over the years, so we first did our training 18 years ago. And we fostered lots and lots of children in that time. So from tiny little babies all the way up to teenagers. And as Kylie mentioned, there's lots of different types of care out there. So we started just doing emergency and short-term care. And it just sort of evolved, like the more sort of comfortable we got. Oh, sorry, my video is not on. I do want you to be able to see me. Where am I? It says my video is on. Okay.
You, Katie.
Oh, can you see me? Oh, awesome. Okay. Oh, that's great. Hi, Rochelle. I can't see you, but that's okay. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, over that time, and as we got more comfortable, and as we sort of understood more about the system and how it worked and who to contact if we needed to know, this information about, where the child, where the child sort of fits in and how and what our role is in caring for them, we started not just doing short-term and emergency care, but we started doing we started taking primary placements. So first of all, we would just take, one single child on its own. And if that placement, finished for whatever reason, and I think Kylie said there were lots of reasons, why a placement will finish, not just the child necessarily going home, but lots of other reasons. Then we started taking sibling groups, and there are lots of siblings that need care. So yeah, here we are. We're not doing lots of we're doing respite care at the moment for one little person who lives with his grandparents, but us doing respite for them gives them like a weekend off, and they can go away for the weekend. And we hope this little one is only, I don't know, about 12 months old, but we really hope to be his respite carer, as he sort of, whatever happens in his life, as long as he, is being cared for primarily by the grandparents, and we really like to keep being respite carers for them. But getting back to Jake's question, sorry, Jake, got off track. I have never had a situation that has been an issue at all. So basically, a couple of times we have run into a child's family. We didn't know they were family, they were extended family. Basically, I was at Banjo's and I had a sibling group of 3 kids, and we walked into Banjo's and this whole table of people turned around and all stared at me at the same time, and my heart skipped a beat, and I just went, we kind of not need to be here. And I just got the kids and we just sort of walked in one door and out the other, and nothing happened. And the only other time that it's been a little bit confrontational was I turned up for a contact visit, or an access visit, and I had a little person, and the child safety officer was meant to meet me on the steps of the building, and I was going to hand the child to her, but she hadn't come out of the office yet, but the parent was there waiting for the child. And as soon as she saw me and the baby, I knew that that was her baby. And I just sort of introduced myself and thought, this is a little bit awkward, but she wasn't worried either. And I just said, oh, I'm just here to, obviously you've got a contact visit with the baby. And she said, yes, I do. And I said, look, I'm sure, so-and-so, the case, worker won't be very long. And she was right there, and I handed the baby to her, and it sort of went off. But yeah, they don't know your phone number. Birth parents won't know your phone number, maybe your first name, I think. Is that right, Kylie? Probably, I think in the child's best interest, if that's okay. But yeah, when you really knew it, that sort of thing can be, a little bit of a concern. But honestly, in all the years, we haven't had, any issues.
Just to carry on from Katie there, most parents don't, I guess they don't wake up and think, oh, I'm going to muck everything up for my children. So they love their kids and they want their kids to return home. For them to be able to do that, they need to do what child safety services are asking them to do. So they know if they turn up at the foster carer's home and try and take the child back, that's not going to be in their best interest if they're wanting to have the child return home. So I guess that's where the foster carer, I mean, if they're upset and angry at anyone, it's more child safety services, I guess, not the foster carer. So as much as, yes, they could find out where you live, and yes, they could come and try and take the child, I can't say no, that's not going to happen. It could happen, but it's very rare because they're wanting their children to come home, so they're not going to do something that's going to muck that up, I guess. And often they're grateful that the carer's doing something that they weren't able to do, and someone's out there looking after their child. So, you know, it's a question that often gets asked without a doubt, and it is a concern for many people. However, I always say if the parents turn up, you basically just need to say, you know, you're not meant to be here, and if you don't leave, I need to call the police. And yeah, they'll leave, or you call the police. So I hope we've answered that for you, Jake. Is there any other questions there, Katie?
Yeah, there is. Carol Ann has a question about not having a car and what sort of impacts that might have on your ability to care for a child.
Yeah, look, that can be tricky, depending where you live, I guess, and what the bus services are like. It certainly doesn't rule you out. It would just be whether there were frequent buses for school, and it can be tricky in northwest Tassie, I guess, because the bus services aren't great. Launceston, Hobart, if you're in the city or close to bus stops and everything, then that certainly wouldn't rule you out in not being able to become a carer. It would just depend on where you live and how well you can access public transport.
Lovely. Kylie, there's another question as well about same-sex couples, about gay couples. And somebody wants to know if the same-sex couples are considered the same as other couples when it comes to foster care. Like, what's the process like? Like, is it any different? You know, what sort of might people need to know about that?
No different at all. Absolutely. We have several same-sex couples, and the process is exactly the same. They both go through the training. We do the assessment with both. And yeah, look, there's no difference at all.
Great. I've got one more question here about a child having special needs, so a child with a disability, or, you know, if you were a carer who actually did have experience in the workforce, you know, nursing or, you know, disability aid, or, you know, we're super keen to have people who do have, you know, more experience with kids with special needs. But if they needed therapy or, you know, extra appointments, is that cost covered by, you know, by Life Without Barriers or, you know, by child safety, or would a carer need to pay for that?
Look, any costs associated with their health, they would come under. So what happens when a child comes into care? I guess the reimbursement rate depends on how complex their needs are. So if their needs are quite complex and they need extra appointments, then we would be looking for a carer who has the time, obviously, because they would need to be able to take the child to all of the appointments. However, if there's any out-of-pocket expenses around, I mean, most things would be covered through their Medicare and health cards anyway, but if there are specific out-of-pocket expenses, that would certainly be covered for high needs or disabilities. But when doing the assessment, we would look for those people with experience in those areas. That's where we would put recommendations in place, or around, you know, that's where your skill set would lie. So if there was an opportunity to care for someone with a disability, if you have experience, then that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Great. I have one more question here about pets. Someone's asking, is it okay to have pets if you want to become a foster carer?
Absolutely. Look, pets are fantastic. However, I guess you need to put yourself in the little person's shoes of, you know, if it's a really big, bouncy dog that's going to jump all over them, you need to sort of think about what it's going to feel like for that little person arriving into your home, and maybe do a gradual introduction. It's good for us to get to know your pets, I guess, when we do the assessment process as well. If we've got a young person who's scared of dogs, or we then wouldn't place them in a house that has lots of dogs, or do a gradual introduction. Or so pets are wonderful, though. It's really, pets can be fantastic for children with a trauma background, because sometimes they don't want to talk to people. Sometimes they prefer to talk to their pets and their animals, and, you know, We've seen some
Yeah.
really, really great relationships and really some really great healing, I guess, as well from children who find that comfort in a pet. So yes, pets can be wonderful.
Yeah, definitely very therapeutic. Kylie, there's another question, and that is about where young people or children are removed from. So if they live, 40 minutes away or in another suburb or on the other side of town, how important is it that they are sort of kept in their same area? And would it be okay for them to, or how often would it transpire that that child would be able to go to the same school in your area, sort of just around that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I guess Tasmania being so small, I've worked on the northwest coast for the last 8 years, and if we have a child coming in from the Ulverston area, for example, we would look for it. If they were going to school in Ulverston, we would still look for a carer in the Ulverston area. So yes, chances are you might bump into the parents at the supermarket. You might bump into them. There's one Kmart up here, so you might bump into them at Kmart. So where possible, though, we would keep children in the same area because it's really important for them to have that contact with their parents. So to place them down in Hobart just wouldn't work because then they're not going to be able to have that contact with their family. We see the same down the west coast. I guess they're really small communities, but keeping when a child initially comes into care, I guess it's really important when they're having such a massive change in their life. If they've got that stability of school, if we can maintain that one thing in their life, it's hard enough, I guess, leaving their family and coming into a foster family. But to have to change schools and change friends and change teachers and change all of those things as well can be quite difficult. If it looks like the child's staying long term and it's not a school that's close or not the school that the foster carers' children go to, down the track we can look at a gradual transition to another school if it's in the best interest of the child, if it looks like they're staying there longer, like for a long-term placement. However, keeping them at the same school and in their community is quite important. So we try and do that where possible. But I always say, look, if you see the parents at Kmart or at the supermarket, you just be friendly and say hello, and the kids can say hi. And it's about having it's their mum and dad at the end of the day. Like you just say a quick hi, and then you can always go, oh, I forgot we need to do such and such, and make a quick exit. But you can be polite still, and so that the child can see that as well.
Lovely. Yeah, no, you did. But I think a little part of that question was whether or not the transporting would be, the responsibility of the carer. So, if and yeah, it certainly is important, that kids have that continuity if that's possible. And we've had numerous different sort of scenarios that have happened in our family. We did have a little boy for short-term care, and he, went to school in Richmond. And so, yeah, I did do the transporting. And I think that was supported to a degree because, it was a bit of a distance, but there was no reason for him to leave that school, and it would have been very disruptive. And so, yeah, we kept in there, but the carers do need to sort of undertake the commitment to transporting that child if that's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've known situations. So with a newborn baby, they often can have up to 3 access visits in a week. So depending, if it is a long distance, I've seen where the carer has been able to apply for additional funding to cover that petrol cost if they were travelling. Say the visits were in Burnie and the carer was based in Devonport. So if they were travelling to Burnie 3 times a week for those visits, there are situations that they can apply for the fuel costs to cover those visits. So I guess it's hard to say. Each situation is probably quite different with that type of thing. Any other questions, Katie?
Yeah, I do have a question about Aboriginal children. So if there's anyone out there that does identify as Aboriginal, then yeah, we absolutely would, love to have you on board, because there are kids who identify, and yeah, if you do identify, then you are obviously assessed as an Aboriginal carer. And yeah, there are kids who identify out there that need you.
Yeah. Look, where possible, if we have a child who identifies as Aboriginal, our first step, but we have Aboriginal placement principle, we would be looking for carers, Aboriginal carers, to care for that child. Absolutely. So yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. What else have we got here? Oh, just the difference between, caring for babies or teenagers. If you don't have children of your own, and you're not sure about whether or not you might be good for caring for a baby or a toddler or a teenager, I think that sort of thing might come into the assessment. So if you do decide to sort of progress on the journey of becoming a carer, that sort of thing will really be, nutted out. Like, you will definitely have, strengths in one area or another, how you relate to younger people or to older teens. But we need carers really for any age group. But, people probably are aware that, teenagers can have, difficult times and be, really still searching for themselves. And, that they do have some behaviors that you might, not sort of expect from, from your own children. But I think the assessor will be able to, and together you'll be able to really work out what sort of age bracket might be right. But yeah, there is a big need out there for, for older kids, for sure.
Awesome. Anything else?
Who's got questions for me? Here I am. I'm ready. I've got lots of good stories that I can tell you.
Rewarding part for you, Katie?
Look, it's amazing. It honestly has just changed our lives. Like, if I don't know, we hadn't had such a rich experience from fostering, we wouldn't still be doing it. But we've got 4 adult children, which I think I mentioned earlier, and 2 of them, the 30-year-old and the 24-year-old, have both just done the course, like to become carers, and they're not ready to sort of dive straight into it now. But it's changed our kids' lives, and they see things really differently, and it has been beautiful for our family. And what was the question? I just lost it.
I've just got
rewarding experience
about your own children, though. So what was the biggest concern, and how has it impacted on your own kids?
Yeah, okay. It really is such an important thing to address. Thanks, Rochelle. It is, because at the start, we were worried not about all of the kids, but about some of the kids and how they sort of would cope with, just new kids sort of coming into the family and not sort of quite knowing where they were at. And the only thing I can say is that it really does need to be done as a unit. Like, your family need to be aware of what you're deciding to do, obviously. And if you do continue on the journey and do the assessment, the assessors will talk to the kids. They will talk to your children about what they think about fostering and what they think it would be like, depending on their age. How do you feel about sharing your toys? Or
Katie, how old were your kids when you started with the process? How old were they?
Okay, so we only had 4 children, and the youngest one was 5. So they were 7, 9, and 11 when we started. Yeah. And I think really to answer the question is that you definitely need to keep checking in with your children all the time. So when we would get a phone call, and we would get a phone call from Life Without Barriers saying, we've got a little person that needs a placement, or we've got 2 children that need a placement, whether it was just for the weekend or whether it was for longer term, we would always get together with the kids as a family, like as a family unit, and we would say, we've had a phone call, this little person, needs to come into care for this long or that long. So it was like, we would often make the decision together. And definitely, if one of the kids said, I'm struggling at the moment, or I don't feel like you're spending enough time with me, then we would often actually say no. Like, you don't have to say yes to every placement that comes up, it does need to be right for you. And at different ages and stages, the kids coped differently, and better or worse with some of the decisions that we were making. There's another question here. I'm single, somebody who spends time with a particular group of friends, and would they need to have the background checks for a foster child to be able to spend time with them?
Yeah, look, no, they wouldn't, unless they were overnighting often in the home. I guess what we say, like, if for having an overnight visit with someone, or it's your own discretion. So if, for example, if the foster child wanted to have a sleepover at a friend from school house, as a parent, would you let your own child go and stay there? Yes or no? So it's treating the child as you would your own. And it's the same when they're mixing with your group of friends. I would just, the only advice with that, if you're quite sociable and catch up with people often, I would just gradually introduce the child. So when the child first arrives in your home, don't organise a big welcoming party, because that will be really overwhelming for the child. But if you gradually introduce them to your friends, then absolutely, I think it's wonderful for them to have added people out there in their lives as well. It's just like having aunts and uncles and that type of thing. So, but they wouldn't need to have their background checks done unless they were staying in the home regularly.
Great. There's another question, Kylie, about how old do you have to be a carer? Like, what's too young and what's too old?
Oh, look, there's no such thing as too old, I guess. It's just depending if you've got the time and you're physically capable of caring for a child. So that would all be part of the process and the medical forms and that type of thing. We've had young people apply and do respite care before under the age of 23, but generally from 23 and up, you've had a little bit of life experience, which will help you with the assessment process, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when we started caring, obviously we weren't grandparents, but now we are grandparents, and it's great. Like, grandparents make fantastic foster carers, whether it's respite, short-term emergency. I think as long as you're fit and able and willing, and you pass the assessment, I think I agree with Kylie, there's no age that's too old.
Excellent. So look, I guess if after tonight, if you go, no, it's not for me, or not for me at the moment, that's absolutely fine, I guess. Part of my role as care engagement officer in Tasmania is more raising awareness of what foster care is and the great need we have for foster carers. Like, the amount of children coming into care at the moment compared to the amount of foster carers we have is crazy. So we're trying to get people out in the community just to talk about foster care. Often people don't realise that they can just do one weekend once a month. Like, we need respite carers as well as long and short-term carers. Yes, the process is still the same for both. However, the commitment that you're giving, I guess, can start with 1 weekend once a month. And my husband and I, we did respite for many years before we had our own children, and we're still in touch with those kids today, which is just awesome. And I think, look, just talking to people out there just so that they know and point them in our direction, and we're happy to have a chat with them. So it's just, if it's not for you, you don't know, it might be for your neighbour or someone you work with, or the postman down the road. You just don't know. I'm just looking. Our youngest child is 2. Would you recommend fostering with children that young? Look, I would say you could start with respite care. Is a really good place to start. I always think it's great when your child is able to communicate with you. So if they're talking and able to communicate, I think that's really important. But there's no harm in starting the process. I guess that's the other thing with the process is you could apply today to be a foster carer, and you might become a carer in 12 months' time. There's no, we're not we're not pushing anyone into it. You need to do it at your own pace. I've had carers who started the process, decided to have another baby. They were on hold for, I think it was 2 years before they actually ended up becoming carers, but they'd started the process. They'd done some training. They'd done some of the paperwork. They were still engaged. They were still really keen, but it had to be the right timing for them. So, you know, if it's something that you'd like to find out more, come along to the training, make a start with it. And then you don't know. Look, I know we've got a couple of little babies placed at the moment that we're, you know, have needed respite carers for. So having a 2-year-old, having another little baby 1 weekend once a month would certainly be a great help for the foster carers who care for him or her. So it's quite possible, you know, at 2 years of age, you would be looking at having a little one, a baby as such. So if that's something, so you would need time with that, because obviously you can't be working if you've got a little baby. You would need to be home, but as a respite carer, yes, you'd need just 1 weekend a month. Do we have any other questions before we finish up? I'd like to just thank everyone for all of the fantastic questions tonight. That was just awesome. So there's obviously some great interest out there. We will email you out tomorrow some more information or what we've just discussed, the PowerPoint and so forth, so that you can have another look through it. I think everyone provided their email address when they registered. So I'll be back at work on Monday. I'm part-time, so I'm not back until Monday now, but I will flick you an email or give you a call if I've got a number, just to touch base, just to get some feedback, and if you're keen to find out a little bit more and have one of our care assessors come out and have a chat with you. So, you know, no pressure there at all, but if you attended tonight and you'd like your husband or your wife or someone else to have a look at the presentation, we can certainly come out and go through the slides and go through some information with your partner or with someone else. So thank you very much, everyone, and I will be in touch with you all next week. Good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening.